And welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson and I'm the owner and founder of Wilkinson Accounting Solutions. I started the Build and Exit podcast in 23 off the back of the work we do with our clients at Wilkinson's, because I noticed there was quite a gap of skill in the market in acquisitions, especially in terms of understanding financial reporting, valuations, and also like how to streamline a finance team post-acquisition. So the podcast has had lots of guests from different areas of business and different parts of acquisitions, looking at acquiring or selling or funding. And I'm really excited today to introduce Adrian Knight. Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Julie.
Adrian has come on the podcast, so a bit of background about him. Adrian has successfully done 3 acquisitions in 24 months. He is built a £3 million group, and he's also done 2 franchises that has got just under 70 franchisees. So I know Adrian does also have another business venture as well, but that's sort of an acquisition journey he's been on in one of his groups. And I thought it'd be a great content for others to learn about his journey. And also we're going to look at Adrian's taken a bit of a step back in his acquisition journey to look at how to integrate a back office. And that's something we're going to look at today. So thanks for coming, Adrian.
Oh, thank you for having me, Julie. It's a real pleasure and honour to be on your podcast.
And I just want to hand over to you so you can say a bit about yourself, really, your journey and why you've come on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been acquiring businesses since early 2020. I've acquired several companies. I've had some successes, but also some real train wrecks in there as well. And it was sort of towards the end of the summer of 2020 when I was looking like very sort of objectively and seriously at kind of the different businesses that I had. And I just felt like I certainly wanted to keep on acquiring, but I wanted to do something with a bit more meaning, sort of to me personally, and something that had a bit more of a social impact. And through a series of sort of serendipitous events over that summer, I sort of arrived at the children's education sector, which, having been a fairly new dad, was like a whole new world to me. And I was fascinated with this new world. And so in August 2020, I made a very conscious decision that I was going to play a part in this sector. And I started by acquiring a very small franchise network called Talking Tots, which only had 8 franchisees to it. So in the franchise world, that's it's very small, but I just wanted to get under the skin of a business in this sector and to understand a bit more, and also to have a bit of credibility. And then fast forward 2 years later, that sort of first acquisition has led on to 2 more acquisitions. So we're currently, as a group, sitting at just under 3 million in revenue. We've got 17 employees, and for the last, it's coming up to 12 months now, we've focused on nothing but the back end sort of post-acquisition work, which has been probably the most challenging part of the journey so far. And we've still got a lot of work to do there. But yeah, it's been a great ride.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that you've taken a step back, because you don't hear a lot of people talk about post-acquisition and the challenges. There's a lot of people that get to the point of close and then you never hear from them again, or you're working with someone, so brokers and things, and they maybe disappear after the deal happens. So then it's interesting, nobody then sees that personal journey for somebody after they've bought it. What made you decide to focus on the back office?
Well, I was kind of forced into it, and forced into doing so, because my last acquisition, which was in early October of last year, that was a turnaround. So that was a business that had 10 employees in it. It had a decent level of revenue, but it had so many problems. It had zero process. It was very old school in the way it was being run. And so going into that, literally the day after signing, was straight into the first major fire, and it was just fire after fire after fire. And so it was a question of, as we were putting out these fires, it was like, well, we need a process in place. to be able to prevent this from happening again. And it was kind of like opening Pandora's box. Like you opened one bit and then you have 10 more problems that would appear. And so, fast forward to today, and we've just done so much work on our systems and our processes, and this is how we're going to approach this. But it became clear to me probably around sort of spring of this year that we didn't just need to do it for that particular business in a state of like sort of being highly reactive, that actually we needed to take this a step further and start to consolidate this group and put in sort of broader systems. So for example, if we was looking at our IT systems for this last acquisition, well, that also made us look at the IT systems for the other companies and be like, well, how are we going to manage this? Like, do we want to have it more sort of fragmented, like a federated like group structure, or did we want to go down the consolidated route? And then once we made those decisions, we then had to start rolling out. And so, yeah, I mean, given the opportunity, I probably would have done another acquisition because it is fun and super sexy and it's a real thrill. But I just knew realistically that wasn't this phase. This phase was a period of putting the right foundations in place so that we could then keep on acquiring, sort of trying to look 5 to 10 years ahead rather than like 5 to 10 months.
And when you did the acquisitions originally, out of interest, did you have an integration strategy?
No, it was completely, I want to be in this sector. I'm just going to go and take some action and acquire a small business and then basically just see what happens and go with it from there. I was so early into my acquisition journey. Like I'd made my first acquisition. It was about 7 or 8 months earlier. So I was still very, very new. And I actually exited that last year to focus on the children's education group more. But yeah, it was all front end, like what's right in front of you. Whereas now when I'm looking at acquisitions, look at them in a completely different way. And I think the level of due diligence we go into now is just levels deeper, and not just financial due diligence. It's like the full works.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you talk about back office, then integrating the back office, just for people that maybe, because there could be a lot of things in the back office, what things are you included in that? What type of things are you looking at?
So, I mean, we've looked at everything that sort of underpins the business. So, first of all, our office and our office location. So, with the second acquisition, we took out a very small serviced office, which was just outside of Watford, which served our purpose at the time. But after doing the third one, with that acquisition, we had to move office because the business was in just a horrendous lease situation. Like we had no choice, but we had to move. So again, it was like looking at office space and thinking, well, we've got 10 people in this business right now, but what about the other companies, and how can we start to create a space where we can, for example, consolidate our finance function across the group, and what would that look like? So that was a very sort of tangible, like back office sort of integration piece that was sort of the first to look at. Then it was like IT, then it was marketing, then it was even sales and recruitment as well. Because we have 2 franchise networks, it was like, well, like there's a lot of costs that can be consolidated here, and potentially we can offer a better service to like people inquiring about a franchise, because if they're interested in one but that territory isn't available, then we've got another one that we could present to them, and we want to present more to them down the line. But then you have to think about stuff like GDPR and all of this stuff. So it was just like this never ending cycle, and we're still on that journey. But it was all of the stuff that's in the background that certainly from an acquisition perspective we don't always think about. Like we're just so focused on the deal and the deal structure, but it's the engine behind the business that that was really it.
And you say you've been focusing on back office for 12 months. Is that what you?
Yeah,
How long
and
you've
we've still
been?
got so much work to do. So much
Yeah.
work to do. Yeah,
So it just goes to
it's
show, doesn't
crazy.
it,
I don't
how
think it would
much
ever
work there
stop.
is, how much work there is on the back office, isn't it? I don't think people really think about, because we see it a lot. One of the things we help people with on the acquisitions in Wilkinson's would be the consolidated budgets for all these things. Because one of the things we'd look at helping people think about would be, okay, so you're doing an acquisition. What are your synergy savings? What are your opportunities? Which is kind of what you're doing. We're just looking at it from a numbers perspective because most people are trying to quantify things. So, if you've got 3 leases on offices, the idea would be, okay, we consolidate those leases. And in the end, the overriding point for that would be streamlining, systemizing, but probably also cost saving. Because why would you not want to try and get a cost saving off the back of it? And when we speak to people that are buying businesses, especially if it's a business buying, not necessarily like if it's a business buying an acquisition, what's interesting is they often don't have their own forecasts and plans in place for their own business in the first place. But if you're going to buy a whole nother business and then bolt it on, and you don't have a business plan or a process, or even I suppose your own internal improvements that you need in your own business, how do you then integrate that into an acquisition? Because you might have your own problems that you haven't resolved, let alone an acquisition problem. So
it's so true. It's so true. And the first thing I'd done when in my last acquisition was I took on a part-time finance director, which I was itching to have previously, but we wasn't at the scale where we could support that. And even then it took 6 months to get to a place where we had like proper visibility on that particular business, not even at a group level. And we're still not there at a group level because we've been firefighting and very sort of hands-on with the last acquisition. But yeah, it's just like no one thinks of this stuff, but this is the most important aspect of it. It's mad really to think that. I look back on myself and just going in sort of all, smile and, fly by the seat of your pants. It's a little bit like, oh, yeah. I don't know what I'm getting in for.
I know it's difficult, isn't it? But it's good that it's good that you've recognised it and you've taken the time to step back and review it, because it will only get worse if you just keep bolting on more and more and don't fix anything. Then that will, in the end, it could get out of control, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And when you say you're sort of like forced, had you seen impact to the end customer on the basis that you didn't have a process?
Yes, we did. So with this acquisition, I knew that there were problems in the business. Pre-acquisition, I knew there were problems in the business that weren't being said. Some of it sort of like they didn't want to say, but also some of it I think through pure like lack of awareness that of their own problems, like the previous owners. And so I structured the deal in such a way so that a lot of the consideration was on the back end, and it gave us a bit of sort of breathing space so that we could get in and actually figure out where the problems were and what they, how severe they were. And some of them turned out to be very severe. But then also had the protection so that the cost of those problems would be deducted from the consideration. So, and it was the only way the business was really gonna, it's the only way the owner was really going to sell it, because basically we were coming in because he was just done. Sort of getting into it, within the first 24 hours, I have a message from 2 of the salespeople saying that the third salesperson was ciphering off leads. And then 2 days later, we had a major incident at one of the schools, because this is a business that builds playgrounds, at one of the schools. And it just so happened to be one of the top 10 private schools in the country, like right on the embankment in London. And the incident escalated and escalated and escalated to the point where the police were on site, trying to stop some contractors who had managed to break into the school with their diggers fully prepared to start digging up all of the work. And this is like 72 hours into the ownership. And I sort of looked at that, and it was very heated, and it was a complete standoff in the end. But I looked at that at the time, and I was like, this could have been prevented in so many ways by simply, for a start, having terms and conditions in place with this contractor, like a really simple fix, by having a process internally that could have vetted them, rather than the salespeople of all people choosing the subcontractor because they were the cheapest and they came first on Google. And so the impact to the customer was like significant. And unfortunately, we had more of those cases where they like all of the sort of like the tail end from the previous like 6 to 12 months, where it was just one problem after the other from a customer perspective, which is exactly why the previous owner wanted out. Like it was just bizarre, really. It's so surreal.
Yeah. And I think there's so many small things in an acquisition that can actually cause such big financial problems.
Yeah.
Like one of the things we always look at is, or say to people is, think about the business they're buying. Is it trademarked? Like the amount of businesses that have logos all over their vans, as an example, that signage is their marketing, and actually the name's not trademarked, and it's never been checked that it's not actually in breach of another, I suppose, larger brand. And I suppose you could argue, well, the risk is minimal, it's never been found out before. But actually, if someone did notice that and the whole brand was at breach, like what would that do? I mean, how would that impact the acquisition? I mean, that could literally be a game stopper, couldn't it? For a period of time anyway.
It's funny you say that, because this business was exactly that. It didn't own its trademarks. It had a competitor who owned its trademarks, and it had another competitor who, it was like the two names but back to front. But I knew this before going in, like as part of the due diligence. I knew that was the case, and it was only acceptable because I knew we'd have to rebrand. Like I knew a rebrand was coming, and so I went in with my eyes open. But I was sitting there and like, how could you not trademark like the company name? Like surely this is, I don't know. It just felt so elemental, but clearly it's not for some people. And it was just sort of crazy, really. Had I had no intentions to rebrand the business, then I almost certainly wouldn't have gone forward with the acquisition, for the very reasons you said, Julie. Like it could be swept from under your feet within a matter of a day.
Well, it sounds like you've done some good due diligence, though, because I think you'd be surprised, Adrian, how many people wouldn't have even known that it wasn't trademarked. I think there is a lot. I speak to a lot of buyers, and the feedback I get, because a lot of people go into they're being taught in groups. So there's lots of them out there, people that buy and people to buy businesses. And the feedback I get a lot from people that attend these types of courses is, it's great for deal flow, maybe a bit of ego, trying to find the deals. But most people do say to me, but actually, I don't know what I do when I find them. Like, so there's a lot of people teaching to find deals, and it's spurring people on to do the acquisitions. But a lot of these people then say, I don't really understand financials, and actually, I don't quite know what I'm looking for. And even worse, when the deal's gone live, a lot of them are, I don't actually know what I'm going to do to run the business. Like, that's not saying they have no clue in business at all. Like, everybody has their own skill set. But, once you take legal ownership of these businesses, you are legally responsible, and then you have a responsibility to your stakeholders to be able to run this business effectively. And I just think there's a lot of gaps in some of this teaching that's out there in terms of telling people the reality behind like how hard it is once you buy the business.
That's just it. And that was me. Like I done a training course and came out of it again all rosy cheeked and big smiles and let's go generate some deals. And I'd done my first acquisition within 3 months of doing that, because I'd set myself up to do it, like in terms of my bandwidth, because I had a business that I'd started and been running for coming up to 7 years. And so I went out and acquired. And my first acquisition, it was actually, I was very lucky. It was a good acquisition, and I exited it as well. So it was a great experience. But then my next three acquisitions were just train wrecks, because I had this false confidence behind me that, oh, this is anyone can do this. This is how you do it. And then went into these and was just burnt big time, because there was largely a lack of proper due diligence, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And it was done all wrong, and they were very painful experiences, but they molded and shaped the my approach to acquiring, which is exactly what's happening now with this back-end integration. It's changing the way, and continually changing the way I look at deals and look at acquisitions now. And so it was like, fortunately, to those train wrecks that happened at the start of my journey, that gave me the insight on how to structure this last acquisition and how to do the due diligence in a way so that I could at least arrive at a position where I knew that there were problems, but we didn't have the answer to them this side of the deal. That in itself was like quite big, because like you knew the problems were there, you just didn't know exactly what they were. But that sort of, that mindset of going into that deal with that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the earlier train wrecks. So it was, it's been a pure baptism by fire in every which way.
Oh, wow. So now you're looking at the back office. So what's your intentions going forward? Are you still searching for acquisitions? What are you looking for?
Yes, we are. So as part of like the back end integration, so people is very high on my list. And there's been a lot of people changes and stuff that's happened, particularly over the last 12 months. But as part of that people strategy, I've engaged a non-executive director, very experienced person within the sector, who's helping to sort of guide certain aspects and components of the subsidiary businesses, but also of the group as well. And as part of that relationship I have with them, they are helping me to prioritize which sectors to be sort of looking at within the broader scope of like our like group mission and what we're trying to do. So that in itself has been a real eye-opener, I guess, in terms of doing that, like more due diligence on like the different sectors and markets, because there's so many to go at, rather than just doing it on a deal by deal basis. So we've been looking at that in quite some detail, and we've sort of zoned in on a couple of sectors which we feel would be a great area for our next acquisition in the context of where we are right now. Like there's other sectors we like the look of, but we're not quite ready, or it would be just too much for where we are right now, and we don't want to. It's all about managing risk here as well. And so we started to look at those, but interestingly, we have started to look at those acquisitions from a people perspective. So rather than going straight to looking at the business, we first identified the sectors based on where we are right now. And then second to that, we've looked and identified a couple of key people who we feel would be excellent and are qualified at running and operating those businesses, whichever ones we end up acquiring. So it's been a complete back to front approach that I've ever done with my other acquisitions, because they've always been about like the business. It's almost like more opportunistic, like, oh, this business has come up, let's see if we can acquire it. But now it's like the complete reverse. So we're looking at those. I don't feel as like rushed, like I have to do an acquisition right now. I did with the other ones. It was like, gotta grow, scale. But then the last acquisition, just like, it was brick wall after brick wall, and we've been steadily climbing over, or breaking down, or going around each of those, which has created space. But it's also created space for myself, because I feel like, even though I'm still very early in my acquisition journey, like I know that with the next acquisition, it's still going to be a journey within a journey. And it's just like the component of timing has gone right up my priority list in terms of the right people at the right time to maximize our chances of like succeeding with this. and not, being called because the police were on site at a major private school in London. So,
oh, it's not funny, but you have to. If you don't laugh, then what you just won't get over it, will you?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this last year has been so incredibly tough because of that acquisition, and I sort of knew. I knew I was going into a bit of a battleground here, but I didn't appreciate the extent of it. And it's been incredibly testing. But looking back, I mean, all you can do is laugh, and I feel quite grateful that there's some pretty surreal stories and experiences there to sort of tell my daughter when she's a little bit older.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now. It's been really good to hear the journey, and I definitely think this is an eye-opener. I think you've got the right idea there, and you're really taking a step back and thinking about the group, which I think long-term will be the better thing for it. I think if you're just going to keep adding on, it could have got into more of a mess, to be honest. So I definitely think you've got the right idea. And I just want to say thanks to all our listeners. If you like our channel, please hit the subscribe button. We are nearly at 2,000 downloads now. Which is really good considering we've only had it a few months. Like, I only launched it a few months ago. So I'm really pleased about that. And I look forward to seeing you soon.